Well, good morning. Happy Easter. Guys, it's Easter. We could do better than this, right? Happy Easter. I love it. Love it. I'm so glad to have you here with us this morning. If you're new here with us, let me just tell you, you're going to fit right in because I'm new too. So this is my first Easter at Lake Sawyer, and I'm super excited to be here. My family and I, we moved up here to Washington from Southern California a little over 9 months ago. So, we've been here long enough to get a glimpse of summer and then to experience the fullness of winter. And honestly, it's been kind of cool. There was rain, and then there was, a little bit of wind, and then there was rain, and, a little bit of coldness, and then there was rain, and then there was a glimpse of sun, and there was rain, and there was a little bit of snow. And did I mention there was rain? There's a lot of rain here in Washington, and truthfully, like I said, it's been a lot of fun. It's been a new experience for us because we've never lived in a place like this before. And I have to say, throughout the last couple of months, the natives have said, just wait till March and April. Just wait till you expect the sun to be out, and it's not. Yeah, it tricks you. March comes, it tricks you, and you're like, oh my gosh, this is glorious. And then the harsh, cold reality of winter returns. It's been quite an adjustment. And the truth be told is, really over the last couple of weeks, last month or so, it's finally gotten to me. I thought I was going to get through. I thought I was going to get through this, no problem whatsoever, but it snuck up on me, and it got to me. I keep wondering to myself, how long will this actually continue? Someone's like, for 3 more months. And the thing is, it's not just me. It gets to a lot of us. By this point in the winter, it's can this continue? When is this going to end? If it rains one more day, then I don't know what I'll do. Or if it snows one more time, I'll let you fill in the blank, because Washingtonians, y'all freak out when it snows. It's crazy, but when is it going to change? But you know what happened a couple of weeks ago? I remember coming home, and I pulled into my driveway, and my flower bed in the front looked completely different than it did just a few weeks beforehand. And I remember being struck by the beauty of these flowers that had kind of sprouted up out of nowhere. And you got to understand, this whole phenomenon that's called spring, that doesn't happen in California. In California, we don't have 4 distinct, beautiful seasons. In California, there's 2 seasons, 70s and 85. That's it. That's all there is. So suddenly, I'm here, new set of eyes, new experience, and I'm noticing these beautiful flowers just kind of blooming all over my front yard. And again, this is a weird phenomenon for me. When things grow in places you don't expect them, they're called weeds. And so my first intention was to pull all of them out, but thank goodness my wife wouldn't let me. And then I remember that night walking into my backyard and seeing many of these same flowers in my backyard. And then I began to notice on the trees that the trees began to change, that there was these things called buds on the branches, and over the next couple days, some of those buds would begin to bloom into these just amazing flowers. And as I drove around this area and drove around Seattle, just to see this experience, this phenomenon that happens each and every year, it changed my perspective. And I tell you that story because I think it's important for us to understand how spring so wonderfully illustrates the message of Easter. Because in spring, there's a declaration that there's a sign of life after the cold, dark, rainy death of winter. Spring is a reminder that winter will not last forever, that darkness will not continue, that just around the corner is a life filled with beautiful flowers in vibrant colors. Change is coming. But I think for us to fully understand the promises of Easter, we have to look at it through the eyes of the first followers of Jesus. For these first followers of Jesus, the world that they lived in was an incredibly difficult place. They were persecuted. They were marginalized. They were rejected and despised. For Rome, who was the superpower of the day, who ruled the region, they were nothing more than just a fringe religious movement. But for the Jews, Jesus and his followers were public enemy number one. Because of what Jesus claimed, and because what of his followers proclaimed, that message was completely counter to everything the Jews believed. And so they targeted Jesus. They targeted his followers. They eventually would arrest Jesus. They would take Jesus to Pontius Pilate, who's the governor of the region, and they would take him before Pilate and demand that Pilate would crucify Jesus. And eventually Pilate relents. And Jesus is led up to the cross, to the Calvary, where he's laid on the cross. And nail by nail, broken bone after broken bone, he's affixed to the cross. And there he would suffer and die. There he would breathe his last breath. At this point, I have to imagine that many of the people who had been following Jesus were confused. Matter of fact, we know because the text tells us that a lot of the people that had followed him in this moment of his life had completely abandoned him, had taken off. Literally at one point, just a few weeks earlier, crowds by the thousands would gather to be near Jesus. By the thousands, they'd come to hear what he might say, but at this point in his life, there's very few people left. And we don't know definitively every person who was with him when he was up on that cross, but Matthew, Mark, and Luke tell us that there is an incredible group of women who've journeyed with him to this whole season. This is what we read beginning in Matthew 27 in verse 55. It says, many women were there, watching from a distance. They had followed Jesus from Galilee to care for his needs. Among them were Mary Magdalene, Mary the mother of James and Joseph, and the mother of Zebedee's sons. And so as Jesus is up on the cross, these women who've been with him, who've gathered, are there to continue to care for them. Now maybe this didn't strike you right away, but notice who isn't there. Any one of the apostles. They're nowhere to be seen. They've taken off. They're in hiding. They're probably thinking, well, if this is happening to Jesus, then you know what? It's going to happen to me next. And so I'm going to go protect myself. I'm going to go care for myself. I'm going to ensure that I'm safe. But these women, these incredibly brave women, will not leave Jesus aside. And let me tell you, I am so grateful for them because of their boldness. Because of their willingness to stay by Jesus, we have an eyewitness account of not just only the events of the cross, but also everything that transpires after it. And these amazing women would watch their Lord die. And I try to put myself in their mindset, like what was going through their mind? What were they thinking in this moment? Undoubtedly, there was pain, there was agony, there was confusion. I imagine they were probably replaying all of the interactions, all of the moments that they shared with Jesus. They're probably replaying some of the moments that he shared with others. The way that Jesus would invite people who had no family, who had no support system, into his family of disciples. The way that he cared for them. The way that Jesus would boldly proclaim the kingdom of God and would willingly share with his life the love of God. The way that Jesus taught people how much God cared for them. That God cared for them more than any bird in the air. That God cared for them more than any of the beautiful flowers of the field. He taught his followers how to love people who were very different than they were, and how to embrace people who would persecute them, and how to pray for those people. I imagine for these women, they're replaying this beautiful, unique image of the world that Jesus was creating. And then this happens. Jesus has been crucified. He has breathed his last breath. He has died. And then we read these words. As evening approached, there came a rich man from Arimathea named Joseph, who had himself become a disciple of Jesus. Going to Pilate, he asked for Jesus' body, and Pilate ordered that it be given to him. So we don't know a lot about Joseph of Arimathea. We know he's from Arimathea. We know that he is a rich man, that at some point in his life he had come into an interaction with Jesus, and it persuaded him to begin to follow Jesus. And so we're told here in the text that Joseph goes to Pilate, goes before Pilate, risking a ton to go before the Roman governor to ask for this, but he goes to Pilate. He says, Pilate, would you give me Jesus' body? Would you allow me to have this body so that I can do with it what I feel needs to be done with it? And Pilate agrees. Pilate says, yeah, sure, I'll give you Jesus' body, and we read as the story continues. Joseph took the body, he wrapped it in a clean linen cloth, and placed it in his own new tomb that he had cut out of the rock. He rolled a big stone in front of the entrance of the tomb and went away. What I want us to understand is that in Jesus' day, tombs weren't for individuals. Tombs were for families. In a family, a wealthy family that had the means to carve out a new tomb would create this tomb, and eventually, when the head of the household would die, that would be the first person that was placed in this new tomb. But Joseph, as he has this tomb created, and as the events of Jesus' life come to an end here in this moment, Joseph realizes that the most dignified person, the person who deserves most to be in that tomb before anyone else, is not the head of the household, but it's the head of the world. And so he gives up his tomb, and he prepares Jesus for a proper burial, and he lays him in that tomb. He rolls over the stone, and then he went away. This was an incredible act of generosity. Most people who were crucified were deemed to be criminals. And when they died, they would be left up on the cross to rot. The birds would eventually eat away their flesh. That's what happened to crucified people. But Joseph said, know what? For Jesus, it's going to be different. And as he walks away, there's this stark reminder that Jesus is dead. But you know what? He's not alone. Verse 61. Mary Magdalene and the other Mary were sitting there opposite the tomb. These two Marys, they refuse to leave Jesus' side. That they are there. They are there, they are waiting, they are grateful. They are so grateful of the sacrifice of Joseph, through his humility and the willingness to give Jesus this distinguished burial that they believed he deserved. But in this moment, the reality is there was nothing left to hope for, nothing to look forward to. The empire, the Jews, had won. in this beautiful image of the world that Jesus was creating, seemingly died with him in that moment. What must that have been like? What must those women have felt? They probably had their hopes up. They thought, well, maybe just for a moment, even if it's just a glimmering moment, that perhaps this world could be the kind of place that Jesus talked about. And as the stone rolls over the tomb, in that moment, that hope is shattered. And in their mind, I'm sure all they hear is the mockery of the crowd. He could save others, but he cannot save himself. What are these women left to think? What do they do now? I mean, honestly, they probably do what many of us do when times are tough. They do what many of us do when life seems to be falling apart. They probably just shrug their shoulders and say, well, this is just what life is. Like, this is about all that we could expect from this life. That we probably just need to find a way to continue to survive, to get through life, and to move on to the next thing. After all, isn't that what it means to be human? And maybe that's true. Maybe it's true. Maybe that's what it means to be human. But to be a follower of Jesus is to believe in something better. It's to believe that this vision of the world isn't the real world. That God is doing something, not just in our lives, but in our world, so much bigger than we can even see or imagine. And so that's why, even in the midst of the most difficult of situations, even in the midst of the most darkest times of winter, that we know definitively that there is hope, that there is a better reality, that there is a better world that is coming, because this might be the human experience, but God is doing something greater. And that's why as Christians, we just know. We know that in the midst of our hurting and our hardship, that there is an alternative reality. We believe with everything in us that there's a better version of the world than we're experiencing. We believe that the world can be different. And we know it. We know it because we experience it. And we know it because we see it every single time, every single spring. We see this beautiful, vibrant picture of life. It's a picture of Mount Rainier. Many of you probably seen this picture. There's incredible flowers, the lilies of the field blooming at the base of this amazing mountain. It's a reminder. No matter how dark, no matter how bleak you think your life is, that there is hope just around the corner. Because Jesus in that grave is not the final piece of the story. Things are going to get better. Summer will come again. One day, it will be 70 degrees. And we will wear sunglasses and use this thing called sunblock. That life is right around the corner. I tell you, living up here has brought the reality of Easter to life in me in ways that I've never seen or experienced before. Because this is our reminder. The story continues. Matthew 28. After the Sabbath at dawn on the first day of the week, this is Sunday, it's Easter Sunday, Mary Magdalene and the others went to look at the tomb. The next day, Mary and the other Mary, they come back to the tomb. They come back to the place where they last were with Jesus. They come back to spend time with the one who meant the world to them. They come back because they do not want to say goodbye, because they know that this isn't where the story ends. And we're told in the next verse that there was a violent earthquake. It was a violent earthquake, for an angel of the Lord came down from heaven and going to the tomb, rolled back the stone and sat on it. That's like, by the way, the most baller move ever. He just rolls back the stone and just sits on it, okay? Amen. His appearance was like lightning, and his clothes were white as snow. The guards were so afraid of him that they shook and became like dead men. The angel said to the women, "Do not be afraid, for I know that you are looking for Jesus who was crucified." Do you get what the angel does here? This is great. The guards were so afraid. They looked like dead men. What does the angel do? He ignores the guards. He says to the women, "Do not be afraid. You have nothing to be fearful of. I know why you're here. I know who you're looking for. You're looking for Jesus who was crucified. But guess what?" Next verse. "He is not here. He has risen." That's right. Just as he said he would. "Come and see the place where he lay. Then go quickly and tell his disciples, he has risen from the dead. He is alive. He is no longer in the tomb. He has risen and is going ahead of you into Galilee." I want you guys to see this. The empire that systematically annihilated people could not annihilate Jesus. And we know this because there was an empty tomb. But it goes beyond that. There were literally the countless eyewitness reports that people had when had interactions with Jesus. It wasn't just the women. It was John. It was James. It was literally hundreds and hundreds of people over the next month who had this interaction with Jesus, who had walked out of the tomb, who was alive, who overcame death. And it wasn't just that these 100 people saw Jesus. The whole region began to declare that Jesus rose from the dead and that the tomb was empty. And that declaration meant that the world wasn't what you thought it was. That everything you thought you understood about the world had been upended, that darkness wouldn't prevail, that life was possible, that life was here now. And so what do these women do? They hurried away from the tomb, afraid yet filled with joy, and ran to tell his disciples. These women ran to go find the boys. The boys off in hiding. And they get there and they go to the disciples and they're like, "Guys, we just saw Jesus, we just saw the tomb, and it was empty, it was incredible, it's amazing, you got to go experience this." And what do the men do? They think they've lost their mind. They're like, "The girl, you guys just don't understand. You're just exaggerating. This didn't really happen. Like, we can't possibly believe you. I know you might have been there. You might have seen the tomb, but we're not going to believe you." This was the response of Jesus' closest followers, but not all of them. This is what we read in Luke. Peter. I love Peter. Peter, however, got up and he ran to the tomb. Peter bolted. Peter took off running at the tomb, running towards Jesus. Now, that might not seem like a big deal, but you need to understand, in Jesus' world, in the ancient world, this was unheard of. It was not culturally appropriate for a man to run anywhere. I mean, first off, they would have these large tunics. And so to begin running, they would have to basically pick up their tunic and hold it as they went running, which would expose their legs. And a distinguished man never, ever exposed their legs in public. It wouldn't do it. But guess what? Peter doesn't care. Peter picks up his tunic and takes off running after Jesus because he doesn't care what he looks like. He doesn't care what people think. None of this matters to Peter in this moment. And much like many of the women, as they've been replaying their experience with Jesus, I imagine Peter's doing the same thing. He's thinking of all the events that transpired in the last week that involved him and Jesus. The not one or two, but the 3 times he denied the Lord. He's replaying the memory of turning his back on Jesus. And then he gets this report. The tomb is empty. And he takes off and he runs after it. Because if the tomb was empty, and if Jesus had rose from the dead, then those mistakes didn't have to define him. So he ran towards Jesus. He ran towards freedom. He ran to confirm the report, to see for himself. He ran to the grave. Because if it was true that Jesus is now no longer in the tomb, then he could definitively declare from the top of his lungs that there is life in Jesus. That because of what Jesus has done, because he's overcome death, our past, our mistakes, they don't have to define us. So I really believe all of us are running after something. We're chasing after things in our life we believe will bring us fulfillment. And maybe you've actually gotten some of those things. You've achieved some of the success, only to find yourself longing for more, only to realize that chasing after something isn't giving you the hope and the satisfaction and the joy that you wanted. But I want you to know, because there's life in Jesus, there is someone who can fill that void. Someone who can give you freedom. Someone who can make you whole. See, as Christians, we believe definitively that life is more than simply finding a way to survive. We believe that because the tomb is empty. Because the darkness of winter will be triumphed by the beauty of spring. We believe it because life is here, that Jesus is here. And just like for so many of us, just like Peter, there is freedom from our past. And so as we close our time together this morning, the band's going to come out and they're going to sing a song. And I love this song so much because this song declares that we all have freedom. No matter what we've done, no matter the mistakes we've made, no matter the issues that we struggle with right now, that Jesus has overcome death. When we surrender them to him, we experience life in Jesus. So I want to invite you right now to stand up with me. And I want you to know, if the freedom that we have talked about this morning, if it resonates with you in any single way, I want to invite you as we sing this song together to make your way right over here to the connection zone, to meet me right over there. There'll be a couple other people there. And we'd love to talk to you about what it means to have a relationship with Jesus. Maybe there's things going on in your life and you just need someone to pray with you. Do the same. As we sing this song, head over to the connection zone. And we'd love to pray for you. I know in times like this, there's this feeling like, what's everyone going to see? Are they going to look at me? What's it going to feel like to walk over there? Don't worry about what everyone else thinks. Don't worry about what the crowd says. Be like Peter. If God's prompting, run over there and we'll meet you and we'll help you experience life in Jesus. Because there is freedom from our past. There is freedom from our present. Join me as we sing together that we are free.
Yes, we're free, free, forever we're free. Come join the song, of all the redeemed. Yes, we're free, free, forever, amen. When death was arrested and my life began. Yes, we're free, free, forever and free. Come join the song of all the redeemed. Yes, we're free, free, forever, amen. When death was arrested and my life began. When death was arrested and my life began. Let's sing this verse. It talks about that morning when everything changed. Our Savior displayed on a criminal's cross. Darkness rejoiced as though heaven had lost. That changed. But then Jesus arose with the freedom in him. That's when death was arrested and my life began. Oh, we are free. Oh, your grace so free washes over me. You have made me new. Now life begins with you. Oh, it's your endless love pouring down on us. You have made me new. Now life begins with you. Come on, if you're free, shout it out. Yes, we're free, free, forever, amen. Come join the song of all the redeemed. Yes, we're free, free, forever, amen. When death was arrested and my life began. Oh, we're free, free, forever we're free. Come join the song of all the redeemed. Yes, we're free, free, forever, amen. When death was arrested and my life began. When death was arrested and my life began. When death was arrested and my life began. Yes, we are. Oh, we're free, free, forever we're free. Come join the song of all the redeemed. Yes, we're free, free, forever, amen. When death was arrested and my life began. When death was arrested and my life began. When death was arrested, my life began. There are many of us in this room that say that we're free, but I know that there's still some. And you want that freedom. You long for that freedom. And maybe you wanted to move, the upper body wanted to move, but your feet were like glued to the floor, right? And it's not too late. It's never too late. God is constantly pursuing us, right? And so if that's you, if you felt, you maybe just have a question even, and like, man, I really want to go deeper. I want to take that next step. I just don't know what to do. I'm not sure if I should come forward or not. Come ask one of us at the Connection Zone. We would love to help you with that. If you're that first timer, again, we have a special gift for you. We hope you'll come by as well. Make sure we get that in your hands. Just a reminder, how many of you have not gotten your Easter picture taken yet? Okay, quite a few of you. You probably came in this door, didn't realize it, but we've got a professional photographer out here in the portico. They would love to get you a nice family portrait to add to your collection that way. And it's all free, all on us. So just go on out there. I think they're still set up to do that. It's just been really great being together today, hasn't it? Man, it's great to be there. Happy Easter, everybody. Have a great week. We will see you next week. God bless you.